Hi, in this video I'm making an occasional table out of Australian timber called Mackay Cedar. The design of the table is waterfall. The grain flows across the top and down the side of the one solid leg. The other leg is really interesting. It's made up of 17 different pieces of timber. There are 4 bent laminations which all join up on a middle spindle that I turned up on the wood lathe. I really enjoyed making this table and I'm really happy with the result. So I hope you enjoy watching the video. I started off with the rough-sided slab. It had a really large crack down one end, so I had to work around that and the curve of the slab. Marked out the leg dimensions. With the saw set at 45 degrees, I made the cuts for the waterfall leg. Here I'm with Jo, my wife, running the leg and the tabletop through the drum sander. I used dominoes for the 90-degree bend. The offcut that I showed you earlier was cut up into sections and glued to the leg and the tabletop. This helped with clamping later on. Here you can see them glued on. If you're wondering about the wet spots on the slab, whenever I get a piece of timber in, if it has checks or cracks in it, I always pour super glue or CA glue into the cracks. It just helps prevent further cracking. You can see how the offcuts I glued on join up to help me push the join together. And yes, I knocked a clamp off the table. I often use my leg or my knees when clamping. I let it dry for a couple of days and then just a matter of taking clamps off. You can see how the paper gave way when I knocked the cawls off the tabletop. I like to call this part of the video the sanding incident. What are you doing? Sanding. But you're sanding the underneath. I know. No one can see the underneath. I can. No one wants to see you sand. Well, they can skip ahead. Knock yourself out. Who made you the sanding police? I did. So after all that, I talked the sanding police into helping me. So there's 2 of me sanding here, one left-handed, one right-handed. To make the tabletop look thinner and lighter, I cut a bevel on the front and the side. The bevel took the tabletop down from about 40mm to about 20mm. I continued the bevel down the inside of the waterfall leg. This I did with a belt sander, and it went from the full bevel down to nothing as it went to the bottom of the leg. You'll see later on how this foot matches the feet on the other leg. The waterfall leg had a couple of voids, which I filled with epoxy. Where did that text go? Here I'm cutting the thin strips that make up the curve on the other leg. In all, there are 6 strips, and I'm gluing them up in 2 sets of 3. Later on I'll be cutting these down the centre to make 4 legs. Clamping the 6 strips into the form worked really well. I use practically every clamp I own. They ended up at about 28mm, and I cut them in 2 on the bandsaw. My shed neighbour, Crusher, was also intrigued with the bent legs, so he gave me a hand to sand them as well. Here I'm cutting the rebate for the legs to fit into. Put a rebate on all 4 sides, and then cleaned up the rebate with a chisel. You can see here how the legs fit into the rebate. After the rebates were cleaned up, it was off to the wood lathe to create the final shape of the spindle. Then a little bit of final shaping by hand. I created a lap joint and then cleaned it up with a chisel. Curved legs fit into a cross section at the base. On my homemade sled, I'm making a rebate for the legs to fit into. This will make more sense when you see me putting it together. You can see the rebate of each piece of timber in the cross section. Here I'm gluing up the curved leg. I had to sand a little bit off the curved legs because they were too tight with the glue on them in the rebate. First I did 2, which allowed it to stand free. You can see how it's coming together to make the final shape. Once again, using my knee. Such a relief when I got all the components together and they fitted. Drilling holes in the X-frame for the legs to fit into. Here I am drilling a hole, then undrilling a hole. I used quick setting epoxy to set the legs into the top X-brace. This X-brace fixes the legs to the underneath of the table. Time to make the drawers. Cut the drawer components to length on the drop saw and then cut them down to size on the table saw. I made a simple joint on the table saw to put the drawers together. I used offcuts of Queensland maple to make the drawers. One of my favourite timbers. And I left the glue bottle right in the middle of the picture. The drawer joints worked extremely well. This table has a backboard with a slight curve in the top and a curve at either end. Here I'm just cutting the end curve with a jigsaw. Onto the drawer fronts. I had book matched Mackay Cedar, which I'm just running through the planer. I'm only going to show you a couple of passes here. It went on forever. Decided on the shape of the drawer fronts and cut them on the bandsaw. To soften the edge of the drawer fronts, I've used a small roundover bit in the router. I had to use full extension drawer runners because the drawers were set back so far. Here's a little bit more sanding, fading into a coat of shellac. I've used shellac now for about 50 years and find it really effective as the first coat of finish. One thing to be careful with, make sure that the next finisher you put on will actually stick to the shellac. I've had a couple that won't. This is the first time I've used a hard wax oil, and I was pretty happy with the result. I had no trouble applying it over the shellac, and it produced a nice semi-gloss finish. Here I'm finishing the backboard, and you can see the curve. Then a few coats of hard wax oil on the drawer fronts, and if you look carefully you can see the drawer front timber is book matched. This leg was as difficult to finish as it was to make. Here's a few pictures of the finished table. If you look closely, I continued the bevel down the waterfall leg, but it went from full size at the top down to nothing at the bottom. I hope you enjoyed watching me make this table. It was a really interesting build, challenging at times, but rewarding. I like the result.